The beginning of the 20th century was a massive time for growth in the U.S. Rapidly growing industrialization started off with urbanization as people moved into cities for better work opportunities. From this came a rise in consumerism, with the manufacturing of mass-produced products that were able to be sold inexpensively. With the increase in population, products would be rapidly bought and produced, and so markets expanded. The expansion of the job market allowed for more time to be spent away from work. An average of 70 hours a week for the normal factory worker in 1860 dropped to less than 60 hours in 1900. Leisure time became more accessible and acceptable to people across class lines, particularly the growing middle class. Appreciation for things like spectator sports, music, and theater grew and became more commonplace. Moving pictures, which had been invented by Thomas Edison and others in the 1880s, began making leaps and bounds within society. In 1900, the medium of film as a storytelling device took off. People were beginning to further develop the art and were able to lengthen films as it became easier to film movies and transport them. Before 1900, most films consisted of simple, everyday things such as ice skating or a football game and weren't very long. In 1908, Thomas Edison headed the Motion Pictures Parents Company, which had 9 production companies. By 1912, it also controlled 6 film distribution companies. Longer and longer films were being made. The first 1915 epic being D.W. Griffith's Birth of a Nation, which was 3 hours of propaganda for the KKK and cost $112,000 to produce, today's equivalent of $2.41 million. The 1910s were also the era known as the Little Renaissance, where the arts expanded and were largely revived by new young people freshly out of college, as well as the progressive movement as economy and social awareness grew. Movies, as a new and fascinating medium to so many people, attracted many great artists at the time. The boost to the economy from World War I, bigger budgets, bigger stars, and bigger films appealed greatly to audiences. However, one addition to the film industry would make the world of film even bigger. For Charlie Chaplin, his contribution was not something he expected to become what it did, nor did anyone believe he would change the world of film to the extent that he did. Chaplin came from very humble beginnings in 1889 London, but quickly gravitated to the stage after hailing from generations of vaudeville actors. His first significant job was among the 8 Lancashire Lads in 1898, then as a character in Sherlock Holmes touring around the United Kingdom. In 1908, Chaplin signed his first contract with Fred Karno, a popular vaudeville act that traveled around Europe and the United States. This act was what brought Chaplin to the US first in his second contract with Karno, while performing the lead role for the football match in Mumming Birds. He was remembered by many audiences as the funny drunk. During this tour, Chaplin first met Mack Sennett, the man who would later sign him with his first moving picture studio, Keystone, for $150 a week. It was at Keystone where Chaplin created the little tramp character that is so well known today. When Chaplin created the tramp, he was making what would become one of the most recognized and beloved characters worldwide, creating his legacy by completely improvising. At Keystone, the policy with the lead director of comedy films, Henry Lerman, was to base laughs off of effects and cuts, and the plot would consistently be created from having any random situation and improvising until there was a chase scene. This was a very common practice for many studios at the time, as it was profitable and well received by audiences. When asked by Sennett to put on comedy makeup, Chaplin created the tramp. The only thing he had in mind when choosing a costume was that he wanted a contradiction: baggy pants, a tight coat, a small hat, and large shoes, and added a mustache so that he'd look older. He explained later in an interview that the mustache became so small because he was concerned about how much of his expression it would cover. Well, it was a full mustache, so he trimmed the fake one until it fit just under his nose. In his autobiography, he described the character of the tramp. This fellow is many-sided: a tramp, a gentleman, a poet, a dreamer, a lonely fellow, always hopeful of romance and adventure. He would have you believe he is a scientist, a musician, a duke, a polo player. However, he is not above picking up cigarette butts or robbing a baby of its candy. Immediately, the performance was well received. It was enjoyed while they were only shooting the scenes at Keystone, and even days after Kid Auto Races at Venice was released and well loved by audiences. Chaplin was given the clothes to keep and to continue as the tramp in other movies. Throughout his career, he would play the tramp in almost all of his 86 films he starred in. As early as 1916, 2 years after Chaplin started at Keystone, the tramp had hundreds of impersonators that would do small acts on street corners for money, taking advantage of Chaplin's enormous success. The tramp was beloved by audiences, and not only in the US. Because the films were silent, it was a simple task to translate them to other languages, and so Chaplin was an international hit with peoples from all corners of the earth knowing the face of the tramp. He was the first to do character-based comedy, and led film comedy into a new era. While plots were still mainly situational, the gags that Chaplin would pull had more to do with who the tramp was, treating absolutely ridiculous things as everyday and getting into bad situations because of it. Chaplin strived for realism and humanity in his acting. Because of his almost immediate success, he began to bring it into his directing as well. After 1 year at Keystone, Chaplin left for Essanay for better money and more creative license, repeating this again for Mutual, and again for First National Studios, all in the span of 3 years. Each time, he gained more control over what he was making, soon being the director, writer, composer, and producer, as well as a star in each of his films. Finally, in 1919, he created his own studio, United Artists, with the help of Douglas Fairbanks, Mary Pickford, and D.W. Griffith. Chaplin was fascinated with mixing more pathos into his comedy, adding more realism and humanism into his film. His greatest successes was The Kid, in which the tramp is Jackie Coogan's adoptive father, after his mother has to leave her baby when she has no money. Chaplin finds Coogan and raises him, only to have police find out he's not legally his father, and take Coogan away to his mother, who became a movie star while he grew up. In the end, Chaplin and Coogan are reunited for a happy ending. It was one of Chaplin's only movies to receive unanimous positive reviews, and critics compared Chaplin to the likes of Shakespeare because of it. While he denied that level of praise, he could not deny that he was changing film forever. He was undeniably a leader as more and more directors and actors followed his new brand of comedy, as silent film transformed. Later in his life, Chaplin would not continue with all the changing technologies. While he joined in with moving forward and sound, he thought color, new editing styles, and camera techniques would never take. Eventually, the industry moved on without him. However, comedy continued its development as it became more fully centered around characters and having elements of pathos for audiences to sympathize with. Chaplin was a leader in the film industry with how much he understood and loved people. He based his comedy on people rather than places, and as a result, his reliability awarded him praises and admiration. Today, people still enjoy Chaplin's films with gatherings and festivals dedicated to honoring one of the first great directors in film. Film history courses teach about Chaplin as a film legacy, and he is still a king of comedy, as he was the one to perfect it. Generations have remembered the tramp as the ultimate figure of humor and charm. He changed comedy and film, combining pathos with comedy, giving it more dimension and feelings, creating powerful narratives that are still effective with audiences today. And for that, his leadership within the industry will live on in the legacy of his laughs around the world.